Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do: to educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade, Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. Okay, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's show. Today we are going to be back to metabolism, and we're going to be talking about the concept of body recompositioning. And this term, body recompositioning, basically refers to the idea that we are trading muscle for fat. So it's this idea that we're losing fat while building muscle, or at the very least maintaining muscle. But usually when we talk about recompositioning, we are essentially talking about reducing the amount of fat on the body and then gaining muscle. Now, the first thing to understand about this concept is one that is confusing for a lot of people, and that is this idea that when you are doing fat loss the correct way, you should be in a place of recompositioning, which means if you are trading muscle in place of fat, we have to realize that weight loss may not actually occur. Think about it. A pound of fat and a pound of muscle are both a pound. They weigh exactly the same. However, muscle is much more dense than fat. And this is why this popular saying that is actually inaccurate, that a pound of muscle weighs less than a pound of fat. So that's not true. A pound of muscle and a pound of fat weigh exactly the same, but people use that euphemism as a way of describing how trading muscle for fat makes the body look smaller. So when you are recompositioning, what happens is you lose fat, you gain muscle. Hopefully you're gaining the same amount of muscle or close to the same amount of muscle as fat you are losing. And while your body weight may not change much at all, you will look smaller because muscle is more dense, and you will look much more toned, much more athletic because of the shape that muscle gives you. Obviously, the shape that fat gives you is more of a fluffy, flabby, bulkier appearance, whereas the shape that muscle gives you is a more smaller, denser, shapelier appearance. You can even feel this to the touch, right? That's this idea of being tone or tight when you touch the body versus soft or flabby when you touch the body. Now, I talk about this a lot as the law of multitasking. And I oftentimes say, and you may have heard me say, this is something the body does not like to do. The body is not a great multitasker. It does not really like to be in catabolism and anabolism at the same time. So let's cover those phrases if you haven't heard them before. Anabolism is what we talk about building tissue up. And anabolism requires calorie excess. In other words, the body needs energy to build tissue. And if you're eating more energy than you are expending, taking in more energy than you are using up, you'll have calorie excess. Now, this calorie excess can go either to fat gain or muscle gain. And if you're not doing something to force those extra calories into muscle gain, then you are probably going to gain fat. But the truth of the matter is, when you're gaining fat, you're almost always gaining a little bit of muscle. And when you're gaining muscle, you're almost always gaining some fat along with it. So this idea of anabolism is building up tissues. And typically when you are in an anabolic state, you'll be building muscle and fat. Now, catabolism is the opposite of that. Catabolism is the breaking down of tissues. It requires calorie deficits. And when you are losing weight and being in catabolism and losing fat, you are almost always losing muscle along with it. In fact, research suggests that 20 to 50%, depending on how extreme that calorie deficit is and what other things that you're doing to help maintain muscle, which we'll talk about in a minute, 20 to 50% of weight loss in traditional eat less, exercise more types approaches can be lean mass. And when we talk about lean mass, because you might say, Jade, 50%, that sounds like a lot. And it is. But keep in mind, when we talk about lean mass, of course, we're talking about basically water, muscle, organ tissues, that kind of thing. But a lot of the calculation for loss of lean mass is water weight. And we all know that you can lose a pretty substantial amount of water weight. So the idea when we talk about lean mass is that usually you're losing significant amounts of water, which go into that calculation as well. So the body doesn't like to multitask. I oftentimes like to say it wants to be in anabolism or catabolism. It doesn't really like to be doing both. And what we're talking about with body recompositioning is this multitasking effect. It is difficult. It's kind of the metabolic equivalent of tapping your head and rubbing your tummy. It can be done, but it takes a lot of concentration and effort to make this happen. So the idea would be with body recompositioning, what we're trying to do is create an anabolic state in the muscle, and we are trying to create a catabolic state in the fat. So we're trying to burn fat and gain muscle. Now, how would we do that? Well, the idea would be to do two things primarily that really make this not only possible, but likely if you do it the correct way. If we move most of our macronutrient intake into protein, and most of our exercise into weightlifting, we can easily begin to force the body to build muscle and burn some fat, especially if we're giving it not low calories, but we're keeping it right in that sort of isocaloric zone where there is a high energy flux, where we're working out a lot and we're also eating a lot to fuel that working out. So we're in this EM state. You've heard me talk about this before, this eat more, exercise more state, which is the best metabolic toggle to use for body recompositioning. But we're not just in an eat more, exercise more state here, where we've got this very narrow calorie gap. We're also adjusting the macronutrients to be very high in protein, and we're moving most of our exercise, if not all of our exercise, to weight training. Now, what does this do? Well, first, let's talk about weight training. When we are doing weight training, what we are essentially doing is we are, yes, burning some calories. We are, yes, changing hormones. We are also giving a mechanical stimulus to the muscle, which is essentially telling the muscle, look, you've got load, you've got demand, you've got stress. We need you around because you have got to be able to do this work. So the body, again, remember, the metabolism is a stress barometer. It's a stress measuring and responding apparatus. And so what it is doing is essentially saying, what stress am I under and how do I have to respond to that stress? Well, if I'm under the stress of load, constantly having stress on my joints and my muscles and needing to do lots of work with my muscles, then that stimulus, that stress, hopefully an adaptation stress, is one that says maintain muscle. In fact, perhaps even gain muscle. So we need a stimulus that tells the body to maintain or gain muscle. So that's what the weight training is doing. Now, the truth of the matter is, if you're doing lots of cardio exercise, of course, if you just ate less and exercised more, you would, because you're exercising more, even jogging and things like that are using the muscle. And so you'd be far better off doing some type of exercise if you want to maintain some muscle than no exercise. For example, someone who just cuts calories way back and does nothing but sit on the couch is probably going to lose a lot more lean mass, probably closer to that 50% loss that we talked about, than someone who is moving the body. So even if you're moving the body at all, even doing cardio, this is a good thing to help maintain as much muscle mass as you can. However, it is a far cry from doing weight lifting, which really forces the muscles to stand up and the nervous system to stand up and take notice and say, we have a stimulus here, we have a challenge here, we must respond to this. So we've measured the challenge and we got to respond to the challenge. And so let's do everything we can to maintain our muscle and hopefully gain some. So then how do we gain some? Well, we give the body the building blocks of muscle, amino acids. We give the body plenty of protein. In fact, we give the body so much protein that it goes, okay, I've got enough protein to recover, and I've got enough protein to repair, and I've even got enough protein to adapt. So obviously you can recover and repair, but the adaptation response is what we want because that's the thing that's going to lay down extra muscle. Now, if we do that, and we also reduce the calorie intake from both fat and carbohydrate, respectively, both at the same time, reducing fat intake, reducing carbohydrate intake, what we're telling the body is, look, we're giving you plenty of energy to do what you need to do to recover, repair, and adapt, but we're also keeping your calorie intake from fat and carbs at a level that forces you to burn your own fat to make up for those reserves. And so what we're doing with body recompositioning is sending two signals. One signal with the weight training says, you must keep your muscle. You must respond to this and even adapt. And then we're sending another signal that says, and by the way, you've got plenty of the resources to do that for your muscle. And while you may not have enough of the caloric resources to do this work, you do have body fat on your body. So use your body fat for the energy of the work and use all this extra protein we are giving you to maintain and hopefully gain muscle. So then the question becomes, if you understand that, then the question becomes, okay, Jade, what does this actually look like? How much protein, how much do we cut carbohydrates and fat, and how much weightlifting do we do? And it's really that simple when we're talking about body recompositioning. So here's the rule of thumb. Really what you want to do to give the body not just enough protein to recover and repair, but also enough to adapt, we're looking at probably around 1 gram of protein per pound of current body weight. That's probably going to be ideal. And at the least amount we want to give the body is 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. So we have current body weight versus ideal body weight. So you might say, well, Jade, how do I know which one to use? Well, if you are someone very heavy in the 250, 300 pounds above this range, what we know is that you probably got a lot of excess fat on your body. And so you probably don't really need to be consuming 300 grams of protein. You want to really be consuming the amount of grams of protein that corresponds to your lean body mass. And another way to do that is just say what your ideal body weight would be. So if you're a 300-pound male and you want to weigh 200 pounds and you feel like that's where you would be at your best, that's the amount of protein per grams that you'd want at a minimum. So very heavy people don't necessarily want to eat 300 grams per pound of body weight. If you're very heavy, you probably want to eat grams per pound of ideal body weight. Now, for the rest of us, and I would say, by the way, this would be people who are above 30% body fat. If you're above 30% body fat, you probably want to use your ideal body weight in pounds to 4 grams of protein. That's the amount of grams of protein that you would take in. Now, if you're in the 25% or lower body fat, you probably want to eat grams per pound of current body weight. The point here is to give yourself enough protein grams to repair, recover, and most importantly, adapt. Of course, that adaptation is the part of putting down muscle and actually gaining muscle. So that's what you want to do with protein. And this is probably the most important thing to count, and maybe the only thing to count when you are trying to do this body recompositioning. Simply count your grams of protein. Now, a couple things here. When you're getting protein at these levels, you want to be very careful of understanding protein sources. A good protein source is a source of protein that is mostly protein, not mostly fat or carb. For example, beans are not a great source of protein for this particular body recompositioning technique, because beans, while they have a decent amount of protein, have way more carbohydrates. Likewise, nuts and fatty pieces of meat are not a great way to get your protein when you're trying to do body recompositioning, because they oftentimes come along with more fat than they do protein. So when we're talking about these protein sources, you want lean protein sources when you're trying to body recomposition. Otherwise, as you elevate your protein levels, you'll also be elevating carbohydrate and or fat along with that.
I want to jump in real quick and tell you about one of my favorite new products. And to start out, I want to ask you a question. If you had to follow your friends around who are not the healthiest in the world and see what they are doing, what would be the number one thing you would probably tell them to do to start? For most people, that's going to be drinking more water, right? This is something that we talk about all the time in health and fitness. It's almost as if we think of it as an afterthought now, because obviously water is so crucial. However, we oftentimes get this wrong. For example, did you know that when it comes to hydration, just drinking water can make things worse? Most people don't know this. Why? Partly because most people are over drinking water and under consuming the electrolytes that help water do its job. What we don't realize is that hydration is not just about water. It's about electrolytes, the minerals in there, as well as getting that water into the cells. And so you do not want to be over consuming water if you're not getting your electrolytes right. And this opens up a whole new discussion, because most people are not getting their electrolytes right. For example, did you know that low sodium, too low sodium, is an issue? Just as much, if not more so, than high sodium. In other words, what we want if we're going to get the right electrolytes is to get the right amount of sodium and potassium and magnesium in the Goldilocks zone. We don't want too much. We don't want too little. We want it just right. This opens up a whole other thing here too, because people who are exercising, doing sauna therapies, doing low carb diets are disrupting and losing lots and lots of their electrolytes. For example, when insulin is not around in low carb diets, you will excrete lots of sodium. In other words, under that state, exercising, low carb diets, all these things, you actually need more sodium. And so if you're somebody who's been just drinking water, not paying attention to electrolytes, and also feeling fatigued, feeling like you're underperforming, not sleeping right, getting cramps, twitches, headaches, any of these things, then you are probably dealing with an electrolyte issue. This is where the product Element comes in. This product has been a game changer for me and many of my patients and clients. This is a rehydration electrolyte beverage, basically. It is a powder of electrolytes formulated with 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams magnesium, without the added sugar and other nonsense that comes in beverages like Gatorade. This stuff is basically a rehydration beverage on steroids. It is the thing that is going to replenish your electrolytes in the right ratios, decrease fatigue, really correct chronic dehydration. And by the way, many people are dehydrating themselves, becoming hyponatremic, low sodium, when they're consuming too much water. You need your electrolytes on board, especially if you are someone who is losing lots of sodium and other electrolytes through low carb diets and lots and lots of exercise. This is where Element comes in. Element is a new sponsor to the Next Level Human podcast. I cannot recommend this product enough. I have been using this stuff for months now, and I have immediately seen changes in my energy levels. I feel like I'm operating on a whole other level, and I have seen this as being the primary thing that people who have been using Element have been telling me, that their fatigue is getting better, especially fatigue that comes after very intense workouts that involve lots of sweating and lots of intense output from the nervous system. Please check out Element. Use the code NEXTLEVEL. DrinkElement.com. That's DrinkLMNT.com. DrinkElement.com, and let's get back to the show.
And so the types of protein you want are very lean types of protein that have a lot of protein per ounce. So things like chicken breasts, things like egg whites, things like bison meat, things like white fish, things that are very high in protein, very low in carbohydrate and fat. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with carbs and fat. These are some of the healthiest things that you could have. But remember what we're trying to do. We're trying to trick the body or entice the body to burn fat while gaining or maintaining muscle. This means we want to give it mostly protein or a good amount of protein, and then force it to feed itself through its own body stores. So you don't want to give it any extra carb or fat that elevates calories, forcing it to say, oh, I'll burn these carbohydrates and fats instead of burning my own glycogen and fat. And of course, when you are pushing the body through weight training, all that extra protein is prioritized towards recovery, repair, and adaptation. So you can see what we're doing here. So the one thing you want to be counting is 1 gram per pound of current body weight if you're, sort of less than 30% body fat and not too heavy, or at a minimum, if you're very heavy, 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. This is the first thing you want to do. And you might say, okay, Jay, that sounds good. I understand that. What do I do with the rest of my diet? Well, the best thing to do after this is simply to consume large amounts of non-starchy green vegetables. In fact, unlimited amounts, because non-starchy green vegetables, are loaded with micronutrition, plenty of, they're not that high in fiber, but a good amount of fiber, and lots of water. Without very many calories, you can pretty much eat these in unlimited fashion without creating too much intake of carbohydrate and or fat. And you can simply add a little bit of balsamic vinaigrette, and this is where, or a little bit of lemon juice and a tiny bit of oil. And this is where understanding if you're going to be doing lots of salads or lots of skillet meals or lots of stir fries, which really this is what this comes down to, you want to lean heavier on the vinegars and things like that and less on the oils and things like that. And so when you're doing salads, you want to make a balsamic vinaigrette that is 2 parts balsamic vinegar, 1 part oil, where normally it's the other way around, isn't it? It's 2 to 3 parts oil, 1 part balsamic vinegar. Or if you're using lemon juice, you want to be doing the same thing. So you want lots of vinegar-based dressings. Same thing when you're doing stir fries and skillet meals and things like that, which this is what much of your diet will look like. Lots of chicken, lots of bison, lots of lean steak, lots of fish, whey protein, these very lean protein sources with a ton of vegetables and not a whole lot of fat. And so this is where you add a small amount of ghee or a small amount of coconut oil, just enough to make the pan and give a little bit of flavor or cook your meals, but not so much to add a bunch of calories. So this is really very clearly a very high protein diet, lean protein with low carb and lower fat. And this is what you want to be doing with the diet. And so I oftentimes use this 5S diet, which I call soups, salads, scrambles, shakes, and stir fries. And, skillet meals would be, sort of the same as stir fries. This is what you want to be eating. And more specifically, you want to be eating low-fat, low-carb soup, salads, scrambles, shakes, and stir fries. And more specifically, you want to be eating soup, salads, scrambles, shakes, and stir fries that have more vinegar-based stuff, more citrus-based stuff, and less fat-based stuff. And so you're going to be eating lots of broths, lots of salads, lots of stir fries, lots of skillets, lots of lean protein. And to get your protein levels up where they need to be, many of you will also be doing lean protein shakes. Now, this doesn't really matter. Just make sure that when you get a protein shake, you're not getting a protein meal replacement. Protein meal replacements will have, again, more carbohydrates and fat than protein. One quick way to look at this is simply take the protein and the fiber and compare it, add it up, protein plus fiber, and then add up the fat plus total carb. And what you'll see pretty quickly is you want to make sure you're having protein shakes that the protein plus fiber exceeds the fat plus carbohydrate. And the more it exceeds it, the better. And so this is what the diet would look like. And yes, it's boring. And yes, it is not necessarily the most flavorful thing in the world. You certainly can have salts and spices and all those kinds of things. You just don't want to be adding a ton of oils and fats and starches into this. And your metabolism doesn't care. This is what is required for body recompositioning if this is what you want to do. And the metabolism could care less whether you think it's boring or not, or whether you think it's tasty or not, or whether or not you don't like separating egg whites from your egg yolks, etc. This is what it is doing. And we're not talking here about whether it's healthy or not. Egg yolks are one of the healthiest things on the planet. We're simply talking about what it takes to entice the body to burn fat and build muscle at the same time. So hopefully you understand the diet aspect of this now. So then what about the training aspect of this? Weight training. You might say, well, Jade, how much? Well, for beginners, at least 3 times per week of weight training, but perhaps even more. And I would say that for most people who are intermediate to advanced, this is going to require, something like beginners, 3 to 5 weight training sessions per week. And for more intermediate or advanced, 4 to 6 weight training sessions per week. And again, you want the weight training to be done in a way that forces the muscles to stand up and take notice. So you might say, well, Jade, what forces the muscles to stand up and take notice? Well, we talked about how enough protein signals to the muscle that, hey, I've got enough to recover, repair, and adapt. But what kind of training do we need to do to make the muscle say, oh, I've got to recover, repair, and adapt? This is going to be training that is higher volume and progresses in that volume. So when we talk about volume, what we're talking about is sets times reps times weight. So if I do 100 pounds bench press 10 times, right, for a set, well, that's 10 times 100. That's a volume of 1,000, right? Now, if I do 3 sets, that's a volume of 3,000. And what we want to do is we want the muscles to experience a high volume of weight training. And then we want to increase that volume, something we call progressive resistance, each week if possible. So what does this mean? This also means that what you probably want to do is create a workout program and stick to that exact same workout program for 8 to 12 weeks and increase the weight each time. This may be, again, boring. You may not like the idea of this, but this is what works. It forces the body to go, oh my God, every single week I'm doing this bench press, this shoulder press, this bent over row, and I'm doing it at a very high volume, and the volume's going up each week. These muscles are being taxed in a way that I need to make sure I'm adding muscle. Now, this is very different than this idea of I'm going to do a different workout every day, metabolic conditioning, and I'm not necessarily going to overload the same muscle groups again and again, day after day, week after week. That's what you want. You want to overload these muscles again and again, day after day, week after week, which means the exercises are going to pretty much stay the same.
Sorry to break into the show, but I wanted to take a second to cover one of our sponsors and tell you all about Paleo Valley at paleovalley.com. These are the grass-fed sticks that I tell you all so much about that all of my friends know I have on hand constantly. They are in my car. They are at my house. I keep them at my sister's home and my parents' house. I have these things everywhere because they are the simplest, most convenient whole foods protein supplement you can get. Almost like carrying around pure protein, low carb protein in your pocket. These Paleo Valley beef sticks are the only 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef sticks on the market. They use organic spices. They are naturally fermented instead of using nitrates and nitrites that can be a problem in some of these cured meats, and they simply taste fantastic. Check out the original or the jalapeno. Those are my favorites. Please make sure you go over to paleovalley.com and visit. When checking out, use the code NEXTLEVEL for a 15% discount. Remember, our sponsors keep the show going by you giving them your patronage and spending your money on these high quality products. You actually do a few things. One, you're helping to support the podcast. And two, you are helping your health. And three, you are making sure that good quality companies like Paleo Valley can be out there doing their business, changing the world, making the earth better. One of the things you may not know about this is that grass-fed organic and grass-finished beef is doing something that is so utterly important for our environment, actually helping to repopulate the topsoil. A lot of people don't know this, but our topsoil is being extremely depleted, and raising animals, especially cattle, the correct way helps to get that topsoil back. This is one of the reasons why I love Paleo Valley. Not to mention it tastes fantastic, but they're one of these companies, like my other sponsors, Cured Nutrition and Organifi, that are doing the right things by the environment. I really appreciate everything they do, and I hope you will check them out. Thanks so much. PaleoValley.com. Use the code NEXTLEVEL. And now back to the show.
You're going to start with a particular volume, and then you're going to start raising that volume week after week. So hopefully that makes sense. You might say, okay, Jade, well, what does this look like? Your workouts, in my mind, if you're a beginner, should be full body workouts, something that looks a little bit like this: squat, deadlift, bench press, shoulder press, right? These kind of big body movements. If you're in a gym, well, then you can use machines, leg press, hack squat, these kinds of things, bench press machine. But basically, I like to do this thing where it's basically full body, and I like to do a horizontal push, which would be like some kind of pushing movement like a bench press, along with a horizontal pull, something like a bent over row. Then I want to do something like a vertical press, like a military press, shoulder press, and a vertical pull, something like a pull down or a chin up. And then I want to do something for the legs that work the whole leg. So this is going to be something like a squat. This is going to be something like a leg press. This could be something like a deadlift, which most people might say, well, Jade, isn't that back? It is working some back, but it's mostly working the posterior chain, hamstrings, glutes, low back area. These are the things that I'd want to do. So if you want to say, all right, well, Jade, give me the workout, I would say, okay, do a bench press, chest press, do a back row, do a vertical pull down, either pull up or pull down, and do a vertical press, shoulder press, something like that, and then do something like squats or leg presses. 5 exercises. Now, again, this is for beginners. 5 exercises, 3 to 5 sets per exercise, okay? And you'd be doing this exact same workout basically 3 times per week or 4 times per week. So Monday you do this workout, then Wednesday you do this workout, then Friday you do this workout, and then maybe Saturday you do this workout again, maybe using slightly lighter weights, and then next week you bump up the weights a little bit. This is the way that I would do this. And typically we use this in a 3-day split. So you do Monday, Wednesday, Friday of this workout, doing 3 to 5 sets of those exercises that I recommended, using 8 to 12 repetitions. Now, I like 8 to 12 reps because when we're talking about progressive resistance and building progressive resistance, the 8 to 12 rep range is a really great rep range. Most people even call this a 10 rep max. 10 rep max is a weight that you can do 10 times but not 11. But because it's tricky to find that 10 rep max within a workout, we use this 8 to 12 rep range way of approaching this. So if you can't get 8 repetitions of the exercise, then you're probably going a little too heavy. Now, if you get 12, if you can get more than 12 reps, you're probably going a little lighter. And so what you want to do is keep the weight in a zone where you can get 8 to 12 reps. And you can immediately see how this helps us with our progressive resistance here. Because what happens is maybe when we start, we're getting maybe between 8 and 10 reps per set. And then after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, now we're able to get more than 12. Then we know we need to go up in weight. So the next time we come in, we raise the weight, and now we're back between 8 and 10 repetitions. And this is how it goes. So this is the way I would do this. Now, if you are more intermediate, and I would even say for advanced, you can split the body up into upper and lower. And the way I like to do this is for the upper movements, I like to do a vertical push, a vertical pull, a horizontal push, a horizontal pull. So again, vertical push and pull. This would be pull downs and shoulder presses. A horizontal push would be chest press and bent over row. But now, because we have a little bit more time and we're splitting upper body and lower body, we can begin to move into the arms. So then you can do something for biceps and something for triceps, right? So that becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 movements. And again, 3 to 5 sets of 8 to 12 reps per exercise. And then the next day, you go into lower body. So that would be your Monday workout if you're intermediate to advanced. And your next day would be your lower body workout, which I would do something along the lines of squat, deadlift, leg extension, leg curl, calf raises, right? Something along these lines. So that's 5 exercises. And again, 3 to 5 sets, 8 to 12 reps. And the progressive resistance is built in with these 8 to 12 reps. So now you have this formula of what this would look like. Now, I'll mention one more group, which most of you won't be in, but there are people who are advanced enough that you may even want to make your resistance training more of a split and start splitting your workouts into body parts. So for example, maybe on Monday, you do chest and back. Maybe on Tuesday, you do legs and calves. Maybe on Wednesday, you do shoulders and arms, right? And then you take a day off, and then you come back again to chest and back, legs and calves, and shoulders and arms. And maybe with legs, you want to throw in core in there. And that's 6 workouts per week where you're hitting each of these body parts twice. Now, most people, unless you're very advanced or very young or using performance-enhancing drugs or something like that, that may be a little bit too much volume. But you get the idea here. We're trying to get the volume up. We're forcing the body to pay attention, and we are essentially progressing the resistance. And the workout, again, stays the same throughout with very little variation so that the body goes, oh my goodness, these same muscle groups are getting hit again and again and again, day after day, week after week. I better do something to adapt. And then it looks inside and goes, well, I'm getting all this extra protein. I may not be getting a whole lot of fat and carbs, but I'll burn my body fat for energy, and I'll use all this extra protein to recover, repair, and adapt. And this is essentially body recompositioning at its best. This is how this would work. Now, you might say, well, Jade, what other things could help this along? Well, if you're a beginner, you're going to be very good at body recompositioning. Beginners can have lots and lots of benefit here. It's not nearly as difficult. If you're someone on performance-enhancing drugs, anabolics, or testosterone, same thing. You're going to get great results with this because those two things, being a novice at weight training and also using performance-enhancing drugs, are going to increase your ability to multitask. It's going to make it far easier. Now, there are other things here that you can do where, that may not be performance enhancing. One of the ones that I love is creatine. And creatine is one of the most well-researched supplements that exist, and it can be really, really good at helping body recompositioning. So creatine, which is really easy to take, you simply get a powder. There's 2 ways to take it, by the way. You can do it in a loading dose where you do 20 grams per day over 3 to 5 days, or I like to do it where it's 5 grams per day, just continuously. The reason I don't like to do the 20 grams because in my clinical experience, I've often had people have some digestive upset or maybe some cramping or other things that can occur when you add in the creatine that fast at that amount. So I just like to do 5 grams per day, and your body will have enough within about 7 to 10 days. Creatine could be beneficial here. And of course, do the other things that you know to do. Make sure you're drinking plenty of water and all of those kinds of things. So this is body recompositioning. It's something that a lot of you have been asking me to do something on. How do I burn fat and build muscle at the same time? This is the way to do this. And I hope that that was useful for you. And we're going to go ahead and end the podcast right here. And I will see you at the next show.